Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to put you right in the shoes of a billionaire shopping for the ultimate mega project. We're breaking down the absolutely mind-boggling economics, the staggering risks, and honestly, the unseen daily realities of owning an offshore oil rig. If you've ever wondered how the absolute titans of industry operate out there at the very edges of our oceans, well, you are definitely in the right place. So let's just dive right into it.
$3 billion. That is the top-end price tag if you want to buy the absolute pinnacle of offshore oil technology. So the real question is, do you have the cash on hand to join what is arguably the world's most dangerous, most volatile financial casino? If you do, or even if you just want to see how the heavy hitters at this table operate, let's take a look at what you can actually buy.
All right, Section 1, Shopping for Mega Projects. Buying a drilling rig starts just like buying pretty much anything else. You look at the price list. Think of this next part as your ultra-exclusive, multi-million-dollar supercar catalog.
Now, as you'd expect, prices scale aggressively with the depth of the water you actually want to drill in. Your budget-friendly option, if you can call it that, is the jackup rig. This three-legged structure literally stands on the seabed, maxes out at about 120 meters deep, and runs a modest $180 to $250 million. Need to go deeper? You're going to need the semi-submersible. That one floats on pontoons, handles depths up to 1 kilometer, and jumps up to around $500 to $800 million. But to hit real deep water, up to 3 kilometers down, you need the drill ship. It's essentially a massive vessel with a rig smack in the middle of it, and yeah, that's going to cost you just under $1 billion.
But hey, if you're a billionaire and a mere drill ship is just too basic for you, you upgrade to the absolute top tier. I'm talking about the FPSO. That stands for Floating, Production, Storage, and Offloading Vessel, and it is, quite simply, a floating oil refinery. It pumps, it stores, and it ships oil right out there at sea. That's where you hit that massive $2 to $3 billion price tag. Now, those giant stationary platforms you sometimes see pictures of, like the Norwegian Trawl A, which is a mind-bending 472 meters tall, yeah, those aren't for sale. Those giants are completely custom-built for specific fields. So once you've actually picked your rig, how do you get your hands on it? You essentially have 3 paths here. Option 1 is ordering a brand new one from massive shipyards in places like South Korea or Singapore. You get a perfect, pristine rig, but you wait 2 to 4 years and you pay top dollar. If you don't want to wait, option 2 is the secondary market. That's where industry giants like Transocean and Valera sell off their assets. And option 3, bankruptcy auctions. And honestly, let's look at why these last two are where the real action happens.
$1.9 billion. That is the staggering loss that rig owner Transocean took back in September 2025 when they sold 4 of their ultra-deepwater drill ships to a buyer in Greece. And get this, these were relatively modern rigs, built between 2009 and 2011. But because they had just been sitting idle for 5 to 9 years, Transocean took an absolute bath on the sale. This brilliantly illustrates that even used rigs carry astronomical financial weight. Holding onto them when they aren't working is a massive, massive liability. Which brings us to the post-bankruptcy auctions. After the 2014 to 2016 oil crisis, you could literally profit from the absolute misfortune of others. Dozens of rigs went under the hammer for just 10 to 20% of their original price. Seadrill, an absolute giant in this industry, went bankrupt twice in just 4 years. Rigs that originally cost $1 billion were being sold for a mere $150 million. I mean, it sounds like the deal of the century, right? But, as we're about to see, a cheap rig can very quickly become your absolute worst nightmare.
Section 2, the unseen daily costs. All right, let's shift away from the fun of billionaire shopping and step right into the harsh reality of day one of ownership. Because buying the rig, that's really just the entry ticket.
You've shaken hands. The paperwork is signed. You own the rig. Congratulations. Now, hand over $200,000 because that is your bill for the very first day and every single day after that, just to keep the rig floating and, prevent it from completely falling apart. Before a single drop of oil is pumped, you are literally bleeding money in every direction. Crew salaries, constant transport, massive insurance premiums, endless regulator fees. Let's actually zoom in on the logistics of that for a second.
To run a large rig, you need a highly specialized crew of 100 to 200 people living out there in the middle of the ocean. Their salaries? They start at $100,000, with top engineers easily pulling in $500,000. But you also have to actually get them out there. A single helicopter flight costs between $15,000 and $30,000, and you are flying constantly. Crew changes, inspectors, spare parts. Add to that the supply vessels. They're delivering food, water, fuel, equipment, and those run another $30,000 to $50,000 every single day.
And we can't forget insurance, right? That eats up 2 to 5% of the rig's total value annually. Plus millions more a year just for environmental audits and certifications. You put all that together, and an idle deepwater rig burns through $70 to $180 million a year just to exist, which perfectly explains the golden rule of this industry. A rig without a contract is not an asset. It's shit. I mean, think about it. If your bargain $150 million auction rig sits idle for just 1 year, it completely eats up your entire discount. By year 2, you are massively in the red. That is exactly why Transocean dumped those 4 ships at a $1.9 billion loss. It was literally cheaper to just give them away than to keep paying to float them.
Section 3. Chasing the day rate. Okay, we've covered the frankly terrifying costs. So how on earth do you actually make that money back? Let's move over to the revenue side of the equation.
First off, we really need to clear up a major misconception. Companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, BP, Chevron, they don't actually own the rigs they use. The oil majors deal exclusively in oil. They want absolutely no part of a $200 million annual upkeep bill, so instead, they lease them from drilling contractors. It's companies like Transocean and Valaris that shoulder all the massive ownership risks. They build them, they maintain them, and then they simply lease them out to the majors for the duration of a specific project.
And the way they get paid for this is the day rate, basically a fixed amount for every single day the rig is out there drilling. Right now, in the 2025 to 2026 window, top-tier drill ships are pulling in about $450,000 to $500,000 a day. That translates to upwards of $180 million over a 1-year contract. Not bad, right? But this rate fluctuates wildly. It looks like a cardiogram. Back in 2013, it was a massive $650,000. But by 2016, following an oil crash, it completely plummeted to $150,000. And it hit rock bottom during the 2020 COVID lows. A contract signed just 6 months too late could literally mean the difference between a $1 billion profit and total bankruptcy. Just ask John Fredrickson. He's one of shipping's richest men, and he managed to bankrupt his $20 billion Seadrill empire twice in 4 years, simply because the timing turned against him.
And why exactly is the timing so incredibly volatile? Well, because in this business, you don't actually control anything that matters. Your investment is entirely at the mercy of global geopolitics. When OPEC meets in Riyadh and decides to increase oil production, global oil prices drop and suddenly your day rates plummet. Or consider external crises. In our source materials, we see recent tensions leading to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a massive choke point where 25% of the world's seaborne oil passes. Following a military blockade of Iranian ports announced by Trump on April 13th, only a few tankers from specific nations were passing through. For a rig owner in the Persian Gulf, a geopolitical shift like that means your contract goes on hold, your war risk insurance completely quadruples, and your supply chains just break down. Geopolitics can literally wipe out your entire spreadsheet overnight.
Section 4. When things go boom. Now, financial ruin isn't the only risk here. We need to take a very serious look at the sheer physical dangers of operating a steel city out in the middle of a hostile ocean.
Let's walk through what happened on the Piper Alpha back in 1988. It started with literally the most mundane thing imaginable: scheduled routine maintenance. But something wasn't shut off properly. A gas leak occurred, a spark flew, and within just a couple of hours, the largest rig in the North Sea was reduced to a pile of molten iron at the bottom of the ocean. 167 people tragically lost their lives. That single event was so utterly catastrophic that it forced a complete, ground-up rewrite of the safety regulations that govern the entire global industry today.
And then there's the liability aspect. When the Deepwater Horizon exploded in 2010, the $500 million platform was completely lost. But unfortunately, that was really just the beginning. Between the massive investigations, the astronomical environmental fines, and the countless lawsuits from affected coastal communities in Louisiana, the total bill reached an unimaginable $65 billion. That is the true, staggering scale of the risk you take on when you lease out your rig.
And the scary part? Sometimes there is no dramatic storm or massive explosion. In 1980, the Alexander L. Kielland was operating normally in the freezing waters of the Norwegian North Sea. Out of nowhere, one of its legs just snapped off. The platform capsized in just 20 minutes, claiming 123 lives. The cause of this? A tiny, completely unnoticed crack in a weld that engineers had somehow left in during the design phase. For 6 whole years, the platform operated perfectly normally with this hidden defect, until one ordinary day, it failed.
Section 5, the final financial reality. Okay, taking into account the jaw-dropping purchase price, the brutal daily burn rate, the wildly unpredictable day rates, and those catastrophic physical risks, let's bring it all together for one final calculation.
So imagine you bought a rig right now for $500 million. In a purely optimistic scenario, you secure a great day rate of $450 grand. That's $165 million in gross revenue. Subtract $100 million for operating expenses, another $15 million for insurance, and hey, you're left with a $50 million net profit. Great. But to just break even on your initial purchase, you would need 10 consecutive, flawless years exactly like that. Now, what happens in a realistic scenario? Geopolitics shift, a bad storm damages equipment, or your rig is cold stacked and sits idle for 4 months. Your day rate drops to 200 grand, and your insurance premiums spike. Instead of a $50 million profit, you are looking at a $40 million net loss. That is a $90 million swing, dictated by factors almost entirely out of your control.
So, we end right where we began, looking at the sheer, terrifying scale of the costs, the unforgiving logistics, and the geopolitical tightrope you have to walk every single day. Are you still ready to play the game? As this explainer brilliantly illustrates, this absurd financial roller coaster isn't for regular investors. It's a high-stakes casino meant only for national governments, massive oil majors, and a tiny handful of billionaires willing to risk absolutely everything. Thanks so much for joining me to break down this fascinating industry. I really hope this gave you a completely brand new perspective on the true cost of offshore drilling.